to remember how we got here. For me, it started on a ski trip to Utah in 2014. I was skiing on those very mountains right there. And my third son was struggling. But that weekend on the slopes, something shifted. His coach said he'd never seen a 5-year-old ski so hard. You guys want to know how hard? This kid peed his pants because he didn't want to take a break to go to the bathroom, okay? And that's the first time I thought, oh no, intensity runs in the family. But I couldn't unsee that happy, alive version of him. It was like reaching a summit. Once you see what's possible, you can never go back to who you were before. So what did this perfectly rational 35-year-old mother do? I packed up 7 kids under the age of 8 and moved here. No family, no friends, no support, just the God wink and a moving truck. I know, it sounds a little crazy, but sometimes the craziest decision is the most sane thing you'll ever do. But here's what nobody tells you about moving in the dead of winter to a new place. All the volunteer jobs are taken. So I couldn't coach soccer. I couldn't even teach Sunday school. And every single way I could find to lose myself in a position was taken. And so for the first time since I'd become a mom, I had free time. And I didn't even know what to do with myself. God wink number 2 came. I met Sheila Peterson in a yoga class. Petersons, where are you tonight? They're here. They're back there. Okay, this Peterson family, you guys have to meet this family. Okay, they are essentially Utah's poster family for outdoor recreation. They introduced me to hiking, biking, backcountry skiing, river rafting, rock climbing, rappelling. A whole world I'd only ever seen in magazines became my reality. But here's what happens when you have 7 kids in a new community. You get enthusiastically recruited for everything. So by the time fall came, I was coaching soccer, running classrooms, and volunteering for every committee. Back to the same old pattern of serving everyone but myself. Always promising, someday I'll get back to me. Someday I'll pursue my dreams. But let's be brutally honest right now. Someday is not a day of the week. And here's what I learned. When we ignore the climb we're meant to be on, when we keep putting ourselves last, life finds a way to wake us up. And for me, it was a car accident. The kind you only survive when God still has work for you to do. And that crash forced me to ask the question that changes everything. Why am I still here? And maybe you've had your own version of that crash. Raise your hand if you've had a moment, a diagnosis, a divorce, a job loss, a betrayal, something that stripped away the illusion of control and forced you to ask, what now? Well, there's more hands, come on. See, look around. We've all been there. This is the human experience. Because sometimes it takes a breakdown to have a breakthrough. And sometimes the accident is the awakening. So there I was, walking away from a crash that should have ended everything. And I started to ask bigger questions. How many of you have ever made a things to do before I die list? You know the one I'm talking about, swimming with whale sharks, eating gelato in Italy, and buried somewhere on my list was climb a mountain. Now when normal people say climb a mountain, they mean the cute one in their backyard with a nice trail and a Starbucks nearby. But apparently God has a sense of humor. And so a friend suggested Ama de Blam, which at the time sounded like a yoga pose, but is actually a 22,000-foot peak in Nepal. When I told my son, he thought I said, I'm a dumb blonde. And so he looked me dead in the eyes and said, Mom, if you're going to climb a mountain, why not climb Everest, the tallest mountain in the world? Every rational bone in my body screamed, honey, Mommy's having a midlife crisis, not a death wish. But something deeper stirred. Something in my soul whispered, what if? And before my brain could object, my mouth said the word that would change everything. Yes. How many of you had a moment when your mouth says yes before your brain can catch up? That's your soul speaking. That yes led to hiring a coach. That coach told me to buy a book about training for an uphill athlete, and that book mentioned a woman with a Guinness World Record. And as any parent knows, the only book your kids will read cover to cover is Guinness World Records. So I joked with my coach. I said, if I got in that book, maybe I'd finally be a cool mom. He didn't laugh. He came back with a challenge that turned Everest into training climb, the 7-second summits, which are the second highest peak on each of the 7 continents. And then my coach said, 7 mountains, 7 continents, 7 children, it's a jackpot. I'm like, it is a jackpot. My gut screamed yes so loud, I'm surprised you couldn't hear it back in Michigan. But my resume was having an anxiety attack, screaming, girl, you better not write checks you can't cash. And I mean, let's be honest, I still identify more with the Four Seasons Hotel than a Four Seasons tent. And my idea of roughing it was a hotel without room service. But here's what I learned about the moment when your gut says yes and your logic says no. That's not confusion. That's not even recklessness. That's your soul recognizing its assignment. Because the thing that scares you most, the thing that makes your logical mind create a 600-slide PowerPoint presentation called Why This Will Never Work, that's exactly the thing you came here to do. And maybe it's the business you've been dreaming about for years. Maybe it's the relationship you're afraid to end. Maybe it's the move, the pivot, the leap you've been avoiding. Here's the secret they don't tell you about big dreams. They don't choose people who are ready. They choose people who are willing. The gap between those two things, the gap is where the magic happens. That's where you discover what you're really made of. So when my coach suggested the 7-second summits, I didn't say yes because I was qualified. I said yes because I knew it wasn't just about the mountains. It was about proving to myself and to the 7 kids watching that we don't get a practice life. This is it. We must do things we think we cannot do. And that dream inside of you, it's not waiting for someday. But here's what they don't tell you about saying yes to your mountain. It sounds romantic until you start climbing it. And you know what I'm talking about. You say yes to a dream, a relationship, a new business, a fresh start, and suddenly you're tested in ways you never knew were possible. And for me, the test looked like this. Wind so fierce, you had to scream to hear yourself think. Lost luggage that resulted in climbing in rental gear. 3 mountains that took more than 1 attempt. Discovering I had a fear of heights and then having to climb anyways. Almost dying, not from a climb, but from getting anthrax because I was sneezed on by a donkey. Okay? I got giardia, which is a fancy way of saying there's shit in your water. There are countless flight delays because planes landing on glaciers need shadows to gauge depth. I had to learn how to use an ice saw to cut bricks to build igloos so our tents wouldn't rip apart in the wind. I got to carry loads almost as heavy as me because only 2 climbs had Sherpas. My climbing partner got his ankle pinched between 2 rocks, and I had to find a needle and thread to sew him up. We belly crawled across Russia's highest peak in an electrical storm, praying lightning wouldn't find us. Guinness decided I needed to climb 9 mountains instead of 7 because there's a dispute on what constitutes a continent. We flew over indigenous tribes where cannibalism is still a very real thing. Then there was an expedition that had us trapped in a tent for 6 days, waiting on a storm that refused to pass. Oh, and compasses don't work in Antarctica because of the magnetic fields. And on one climb, my dear friend had to be airlifted off the mountain because of frostbite. And on another, I lost a teammate in an avalanche. Every single day, my body screamed, turn around, stop. It's enough. But one question kept me moving forward. And this one question will change your life too. What if the next step is the one that gets me to my goal? So I took it, one step, and then another and another, because that's all any of us can do, one step at a time. Because here's the truth about persistence. All of a sudden, that dream that felt impossible was only one mountain away, one final push, one last summit. And when you take those last few steps towards the top, you slow down. You want to savor every single second. Because every step brings back memories of all the times you wanted to turn around and you didn't. And then almost in disbelief, your last step arrives. And when that last step arrives, you inhale the deepest breath you've ever taken. And you hold on to it for as long as you can. And in that moment, the world disappears. There's no wind, there's no sound, there's no mountain, there's not even a you. It's just awe. This pure, overwhelming awe of what the human spirit can achieve. And it's so intense, it comes out as tears out of the side of your eyes because your body can't contain it. And then as slowly as you can, you exhale. And the world starts to return. And you can feel the wind on your face, and you feel the heat of the sun on your back, and you have the ache of the climb in your bones, proof that you're strong enough to get here. You stand there humbled, yet grateful for the universe's grace that allowed you this one perfect moment in time. And then you have to climb down. But just before you do, you talk to your soul, and you throw it out back into the world, and you say, I can't wait to find you again. Because you realize life is about the climbs that you're willing to take on. And here's what I've learned about climbing the hardest mountains in the world. We don't climb to plant flags. We climb to discover who we are. And that summit, it isn't a trophy. It's the truth, showing you what you're truly made of. Mountains taught me discipline when I craved comfort, resilience when I wanted to quit, and self-leadership when no one else could carry me. And the power of a team, because big mountains take big teams, and so do big dreams. So maybe your mountain is teaching you the same thing right now. How to lead when you're scared, how to persist when you're tired, how to believe when everyone else is crazy. Because here's the thing, when you're in your own death zone, whether that's the chemo chair, the late nights building your business, or the silence of an empty house when the kids leave, the climb strips you down. It humbles you. It tests every ounce of who you are. And then it rebuilds you. Stronger, wiser, more aligned with who you're meant to be. It's brutal, it's beautiful, and it will change you if you let it. So whatever your mountain is, remember this. Impossible is just the word people use until someone like you proves them wrong. Each of us carries something inside of us that's ours to bring to life. Something the world needs from us. Something that will leave a legacy. So I need you to trust the detours. Embrace the setbacks. Even the so-called accidents. They're not mistakes. They're pattern interrupts. God winks. Designed to realign you with your mission. So here's to the climbs of our lives. Here's to saying yes when logic says no. And here's to taking the next step even when we can't see the summit. Thank you.